Given that we are halfway in March and we are beginning to see more birds, I thought it might be good for us to have someone come and join us from the county who can tell us about the bird migration and their journeys. So please welcome Miss Rebecca Craps from the Forsyth County Cooperative Extension Service. Good afternoon, Rebecca.
Good afternoon, Alvin. Thanks for having me on again.
Yes, I almost called you the bug lady because that's what we talked about before. But how did the cicadas return work out for us?
So here in the Piedmont Triad, we did not see many of the periodical cicadas. We did see our normal summer population like we always do. And actually this year in the Blue Ridge area, so not here, there will be another brood emerging. We will not see brood 13 again here until 2037.
2037, wow. Well, so that's a few years away.
Just a few.
Yes. Well, so let's talk about the bird migration. What kind of birds are we expecting to see migrating?
So primarily songbirds are what we're going to see migrating. We will see our ruby-throated hummingbird return back typically early April, but otherwise we're seeing flycatchers, a number of different types of warblers. That's kind of what we'll be looking for in backyards and city parks and county parks around the area. Really mid-April to mid-May is the peak of migration in our area.
So any ducks or geese or cranes? Do we see those?
Geese do migrate, but for our spring migration in terms of large numbers of birds flying overhead, we're mostly focused on those songbirds.
The songbirds.
Toward the coast, you'll see more of those shorebirds.
Very good. Then what will be different with the migration this year?
So our big goal this year is just to bring attention to the fact that during peak migration, again, mid-April to mid-May, we really see millions of birds flying overhead.
Wow.
It's not that you're necessarily going to look up and see them. They're actually using weather radar. Cornell Lab of Ornithology has a website called Birdcast that people can go on. And it uses weather radar to track the numbers of birds flying overhead. And so you don't see them flying primarily because they're flying at night. But you'll see potential signs of them during the day. People may see them at their bird feeders in their backyards or out in parks. They may hear calls that are a little bit different than what they hear from our resident birds. So we may see them during the day when they stop over, for resources, food, water, shelter during the day, but they're flying pretty high up at night. So we won't necessarily be able to look up and see them.
Wow. And did you say millions?
Mm-hmm. Millions.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So where are these birds going? Where are they off to?
Yeah, right. Why are they flying these long distances? So basically they're following resources. So what happens as it starts to cool off, leaves fall off of trees, there's not as much food in our area and areas north of us. So they follow resources. So they fly south where they can find food. And then once it gets back to be springtime here, we've got a plethora of food for them to eat. Insects, plants are blooming, budding. And so there's places for them to build nests. There's shelter again. There's food. So they're basically following those food resources by flying south and overwintering in the tropics.
Okay.
And then flying north in the spring to get back to their nesting and breeding areas.
Well, that's sort of what the humans do, don't we? They'll go south.
I was thinking that this morning, actually. It's exactly the same thing. We want to go south and where it's nice and warm in the winter, and then
come back.
back.
Wow. So what can bird watchers, what's the best way to see some of the birds that are migrating?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, people may see them in their backyards on feeders, birds that they don't typically see or recognize. There are some great tools that people can use. There's a great app called Merlin, again, Cornell Lab of Ornithology. It can ID birds by photos. It can ID birds by sound. I like to sit in my backyard and just turn it on and record all of what's out there, and it teaches you what you're listening to. So that's one way. Forsyth Audubon actually leads a number of bird walks throughout the month, and they post updates about migratory birds that are coming through when one has been seen in a park. If people are signed up for their emails and listserv, they can get notifications about where those are, and they can participate in those bird walks with that association to learn more about birds and birding.
So that's Forsyth Audubon?
Forsyth Audubon, yeah.
And they have a web?
Yep, they have a great website. They list all their events. They meet monthly, and they do a lot of advocacy work, helping to promote healthy bird habitats around our area.
Great. So how can we then, we're a great loving community, So, and we love animals. So, but how can we perhaps help with the birds that may make it easy for them in their journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So a recent study several years ago actually determined that somewhere in the ballpark of 1 billion birds die each year during migration, and that's both spring and fall migration. And the primary reason for that is light pollution. Birds are following a star map at night when they're migrating. And so when there's excess light pollution, especially in urban areas, it causes reflections off of buildings, reflections off of homeowners' windows, which causes birds to fly into buildings, not realizing that they're not in the air, in the sky. So one thing that people can do, there's a big campaign called Lights Out. Winston-Salem, the city of Winston-Salem, actually passed an ordinance last fall to be a lights out city.
Okay.
So the city is aware and turning off lights. A lot of folks think it's the big buildings, in cities that are problematic. But most of the light pollution in an urban area is actually coming from all of the residences around. And so one of the biggest things people can do at night is to turn their lights off outside or use motion-censored lights, especially upward-facing white lights. Advocating for the places where they work to be aware and turn lights off at night. Closing curtains on windows to prevent birds from seeing that reflection. So that's a really simple one that folks can do during that peak migration in the spring and in the fall, is just to turn their lights off at night.
Wow, and I've learned something new here too. Light pollution. I don't know where. That's the first I've heard of that. So, but it makes sense.
Right.
It makes
Absolutely.
sense. So we can help by reducing our light pollution.
Exactly.
Turning off those lights. Yeah. Anything else you want to add, Rebecca, about the birds, or anything else that you do from your office?
So I think it's a great time during migration for people to learn more about birds. Like I said, participating in some of those Forsyth Audubon events, putting out seed and water, and making sure birds have that food and water and shelter that they need when they're passing through, because there are going to be a larger number of birds around during the day compared to our normal resident birds.
Great. Well, thanks again for coming and helping us to know how to be a good citizen by helping our birds.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's our show for this week. I want to thank all of our guests from Forsyth County for coming and sharing great information with each and every one of us. Please join us again next Sunday at noon for another edition of Empowering You with me, Alvin Atkinson, here on WSNC 90.5 FM.